This is not about me. This is about two incredibly wonderful, talented, smart marketers talking about, and as coincidence would have it, on this stage at this time a year ago is when I actually met Jason, which is pretty incredible. And it has been a relationship built on magic.
Nice.
So listen, I am delighted.
Do you want me to move out?
Yeah, please. We need a little separation. He brought up my wife a minute ago. So, all right. So we're having a really great conversation. We're talking about some wonderful things. Social has been a huge topic of conversation today. We've heard some really interesting topics of social that I care not to touch on for the sake of not getting fired or getting blasted. But I want to start out, before we get to the matter at hand, it's a new year, NRF. It's an important time. A lot of companies are planning, they're strategizing, they're learning from last year, making changes, doing what they can. So first and foremost, company aside, personally, any New Year's resolutions that you want to publicly claim so that we can follow up this time next year?
Go ahead.
One of the things I'm trying to think about this year, both personally and professionally with my teams, is like trying to operate without fear, which seems sort of counterintuitive for the social space, but I think I'm coming from brands and companies where, we have really strict, stringent approaches, and our willingness to try new things at times can be lower. And so, I think any big company too, you're also up against just a lot of different dynamics. And so the more I think my team can operate without fear, I'm optimistic that we can accomplish a lot.
That was really good.
Okay. I'll report back.
So first I wanted to say kudos to the Brand Innovators team for providing a sunset while I speak. I asked for that specifically. I thought it was a little diva-ish, but they provided it, so thank you guys. That was awesome. From a New Year's perspective, I'm probably going down the practice what you preach lane. So, 1-800-Flowers, we're actually an enterprise of 17 different brands, Harry and David, Cheryl's Cookies, Popcorn Factory, Personalization Mall, etc. And our core value is really around building more and meaningful relationships for our customers. So kind of pivoting a bit from being a gift company or a gifting company to really getting people to understand how important relationships are, and then being a part of those relationship conversations and providing tools and content around relationships and making them stronger. So personally, I'm going to work on that as well. I think as Todd just mentioned, it's been a year since we did our last panel, but shame on me for not being more in touch and keeping our relationship going. But this is fun being back on the panel with you. But I need a lot of work as relationships, so doing that here at NRF and Brand Innovators. So that's it.
All right, great. Mine's to grow more hair.
Yeah.
So okay, let's get to the matter at hand. Social, and you talked about fear. So let's just get right to that. Brand safety is a huge component to social. And an understanding, especially in the age of user-generated content, what goes in and what goes out, and the followers. There's a gentleman here who I met during the break who is Excel Daddy, talking about Microsoft Excel. He's got 500,000 followers. I'm sure not, or maybe I'm not sure, sponsored by Microsoft. They have no opportunity to understand what he posts, how often he posts. So as a marketer, as a leader in these organizations, owning the messaging out into the ecosystem, what are your thoughts on that? How do you actually get a hand in that to make sure that what's being shared is accurate, is credible, and is useful and valuable to the people ingesting some of that media?
Really hard. I think just by way of introduction, as you can see, I work on two brands at Wayfair, Perigold.com, which is our luxury marketplace. If you've ever shopped it, it's really quite special in terms of the products and the brands that we carry. And then Birchlane, which is actually a specialty retail brand. And so brand safety, important for the whole company, but I think there's varying degrees as you think about what space, particularly in the luxury space, that a brand plays in. And I think, on a brand like Perigold, we really think about who are the people we want to be in partnership and relationship with. I know when Karina was talking about Tourneau, like, you want to be really choosy. Like, obviously you have more risk tolerance, I think, the more mass market maybe you go, or depending on who your audience is. But at Perigold, we're really, really choosy about who we're partnering with. And so we actually have worked really hard to organically curate a number of different what we call high-end designers that we're partnering with, where they're creating designer shops on our site, creating content, we're showcasing that content, and it's people we've really deeply vetted that we trust, and we feel confident that we're going to be kind of showing up in their feed and reaching their audience. And then to your point, like the message we put out, like the best you can do, because it's very difficult to control, 100% for brand safety. And, obviously try to do that at my previous brands that were also pretty buttoned up, Amex and Bloomberg. And so the best you can do is, like, to your point, what's the content and the message you're putting out? And, like, are you putting out something where people trust your brand and your authenticity, and so that when they see you show up potentially somewhere else, they're like, that doesn't make sense to me. That's like a mismatch. And, I think those are some of the things that you can do, and at least that we're doing at Perigold. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, no, I think, you can't spend too much time worrying about the things you can't control on social media. I mean, we just heard from EOS where they had a major growth opportunity by some uncontrolled, random, somewhat profane, post that somebody else did outside of their organization, which they never would have put together themselves. So, the best that we can do is control what we can control. We create sort of content pillars around what we want to say in social media, whether it's DIY content or it's behind the scenes content, and it's also storytelling, to be honest. So that is the key to the platform, is storytelling for us, and being able to show people that behind the scenes there are growers, there are bakers, there are makers, there are crafters and artisans that are putting together our product. Every day in Columbus, for Cheryl's Cookies, they're going and baking these cookies, for orders. We're not just this faceless D2C company that people click and all of a sudden cookies show up at their door. We have tens of thousands of florists that are hand making these bouquets that you buy online. So for us, it's the storytelling part, and the best we can do is just make sure we're getting out there and we're producing those stories and putting it out in the ether and seeing what comes out, and then monitoring, of course, and listening and making sure, as EOS was saying, seeing what's out there in the ecosystem that you're not controlling, and respond when appropriate.
Yeah, my favorite part of that is the pear farm.
Yeah,
which I don't think many people. Yeah, which I don't think
1 year ago. He still knows the pear farm.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And he actually goes to visit the pear farm physically. Which
anybody
is
know
cool.
Harry and David Pears? Is anybody familiar with that?
Very good.
So we actually just had an uncontrolled, random TikToker that I think she was 19 years old, 18 years old, and she was out there just talking about the craziness of these pears. She doesn't know where they come from, but every year they show up at her house and there's one wrapped in gold. She has no idea what the gold is, but they're awesome. And she always tries the gold one, but it tastes just like the other one, so she's not quite sure. But it was an awesome sort of viral moment for us, on TikTok, to go behind the scenes. But it was a great example of the pears and the pear orchards.
Yeah, so there are those viral moments, right, where people do something that you don't expect. Yeah. My favorite, I think, was one of the original applications of social influencing, which was, I forget his name, Peter Shankman. He went on Twitter while he was on a flight and said, I could really use a Morton's steak. And when he landed at JFK, Morton's had sent a busboy with a towel on arm holding a fully cooked steak. Yeah. And that was the original, right?
I could use a Jaguar.
There you go.
By the way.
I don't know that X can help anybody these days, but good luck with that. So, my question is around that, right? So, has there been an extension? Has there been an execution that has surprised you? And you've actually kind of leaned into it and played with it a little bit. Have you taken one of those chances without fear to really promote the brand and get to a place where now you've actually embraced what those users are generating? And the answer could be no.
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah, you start, yeah.
Yeah. I think some of the things we've been doing from a collaboration standpoint have been interesting. So for example, we worked with Mattel, so with Barbie and the Barbie movie coming out, we did some really cool collaborations and had some really good designs where we had a specialty bouquet that was actually in a Barbie roller skate. So you would have these pretty cool social media moments of the skate just going by and with the flowers in it. But we collaborated with the Hunger Games, and we actually have a Hunger Games inspired white rose that you can send to somebody that has a Hunger Games logo. And
is that telling them that you want them to die?
Yeah,
is that how that works?
You can control the message. Okay, we're just putting the platform out there. But I think some of these collaborations that we're doing have really good moments because again, that's the point. You can take that. You can do whatever you like as a customer. You can wear the roller skates, or you can do your own custom integration, or put the flowers into your own Barbie-inspired vase, or take that Hunger Games flower and do some sort of story with it. So I think just providing those opportunities and those platforms for consumers to run with it, I think it has been what I've appreciated the most.
I like that. I feel like making trends feel accessible for people, whatever, even if that's just whatever the zeitgeist or the cultural topic is of the moment, people want to actually feel part of that. I think that's a universal consumer insight that I'm making up right now, but I feel that way. One of the things we've done is we carry hundreds and thousands of products, and so tapping into whatever the thing is and curating against that. So for us, we launched probably almost a year ago now, or maybe less, a social first kind of content execution called Friday Finds. And so whatever the thing of the moment is, it was Barbie at one point. I don't know if I had to have younger people on my team teach me about the Roman Empire meme. I don't know for any of the Gen Zers out there. And so we curated, for example, a whole bunch of products that felt very of the moment Roman Empire. We curated a Barbie collection. We have burl wood, if you guys are into interiors, that we did last week. And so whatever the thing of the moment is, you can kind of find a way in, right? And I think even when it's a little bit of a stretch, that's actually kind of fun for people because if they can kind of see the dot connecting, it can be really exciting. And so, we do less of kind of the wacky stuff, given that doesn't make sense for our brand expression and personality. But I think finding these ways to still bring it into whatever the latest thing is, makes the brand feel fresh and accessible, but also makes people feel part of the trends.
Love it. So by the way, during the break, Jason said to me, I hate you. I hate you as a host because you send these prepared questions and then you totally go off script and throw something at me that I'm not prepared
1 year later, and I still remember those script questions.
So let's get back to script a little bit. We're talking about some fun stuff, and certainly creativity as a part of marketing. The art is wonderful and fulfilling and fun, and then you've got to talk about revenue. So talk to me about how you actually start measuring the revenue impact of some of these applications. What are you actually doing? What are the metrics that you're looking at? Are you actually seeing a significant uptick in sales as a result of some of these executions?
Yes. The answer is yes. But each activity might play a different role in the mix. And so there are very specific revenue driving activities. I have this product. Let me show you this thing. Great, click buy. That's very easy to measure and track. When we are doing things that might be a little bit more outside of the clear, either number one, tracking and measurement category, but two, are untested and unproven, it might be that we just want this to be neutral, and then we've got some secondary metrics that we are looking for. So, in the example that I was giving you guys about Friday Finds, are we going to immediately sell thousands of those products? No, but have we actually increased engagement? Have we seen increased views of individual SKU level product pages? And are we watching, revenue tick up over time? I think one of the examples that I'd give that we've been really successful with recently is we've launched, more sort of full funnel marketing, including CTV advertising in certain markets. And we've sort of done the old school, market level testing. And it's been really fun to do that, because you can actually watch the impact of some of these things that are harder to measure, and then you can see the impact of them. So for example, we launched a campaign in only 3 markets, San Francisco, Denver, and Raleigh. Naturally, we saw traffic double, but we also saw revenue go up 15% in those markets compared to their comparables. And so, you're not able to watch the exact click for that product, but when you set it up structurally so that you can actually test whether you're seeing the revenue impact and then see that come through, it's really exciting, because it means that some of the creative stuff that you're talking about really makes a difference. So not just showing up, obviously, in different media platforms or channels in that market, but we've also kind of rounded that out, with a variety of other, social executions or PR executions, and how do you make kind of that full cocktail of marketing activities work and then measure it.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think probably the longer-winded answer is there is a part of this that you have to be a marketer and you have to be a storyteller yourself as far as some of these metrics are concerned, because there is a lot of blurriness and some gray areas as far as the one-to-one relationship. So I don't know how many of you experience this in your career, but I hear it all the time where it's like you look at a KPI, say sentiment or engagement metric, and somebody meets you, well, it can't really be helping because revenue is flat. You're like, okay, well, there's a lot of other variables out there that make revenue flat. It doesn't necessarily mean it's this particular KPI. So what we've tried to do is at least get as much tangible information as possible. So whether it's, I can look at blog readers and maybe I can identify 10% of those, and I can say, okay, from those 10%, I can see that their growth in revenue and LTV is greater than people who have not been reading the blog. So there is some extrapolation in there. Maybe there's some fudging a little bit, but at least it's as close into tangible and direct as possible. And then you just keep building off of that. So you got to find wins, and you got to find some connection to piece together some of these dots, and then you start to get momentum, and then people start to believing in you because you are analytically focused, or at least trying to be grounded, and then you can go from there. I think if you start from a very intangible approach and just come up with theories, I don't think your credibility in an organization is going to grow, but you got to start somewhere. You got to start near in, get it as close to direct as possible, and then keep expanding.
Oh, God, I love those answers, because it definitely is a perfect segue into the next question, which is, now that you've established some metrics for success, trying to understand the impact of all of this stuff as it relates to the business, you're a CMO. What does the conversation look like with your CFO, with your CEO, when it comes to budget allocation? How are you making a case for social? At what point does he turn to you and be like, hey, I'm calling BS on all of this stuff? You've talked about building the credibility of the metrics, and yet, at the end of the day, and especially for maybe a publicly traded company, earnings become a really key component to things. So talk to me about budget allocation and how those decisions get made within all 3 of the organizations. So your organization and the 2 that you lead.
Want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a long process. There's definitely no single and quick answer, and certainly a CFO lens is going to be much different than my lens. But again, I think it's taking a look at certain metrics and bigger metrics like market share, customer sentiment, starting to tie certain metrics like that to revenue growth, tying certain metrics like that to NPS scores, and then NPS scores to conversion rates. So you got to start connecting the dots. You can't just ignore the fact that the CFO is going to look for the tangible answer, but at the same time, you really can't spend your entire day trying to get those metrics pieced together. So when I look at budget allocation, I do understand that there needs to be a branding impact. There needs to be an opportunity, and depending on which brand we look at, it's a small brand that needs market share, or if it's a large brand that needs to hold on to market share. And then you start to figure out, okay, what is key for me to do that? And you start breaking it apart. So if it's paid search and you know what cost per click is going to be, or some estimate, and unfortunately Google costs keep going up, so I've heard, you need to start to allocate certain dollar amounts to those certain channels, and then you got to start thinking, okay, outside of the box, here are the new ideas. Here are some new channels you have to test. So I've always been a fan of a testing budget. You have to allocate, in my opinion, at least 10% of your overall budget to completely testing, and that test budget has nothing to do with your KPIs that you use for the other 90% of your budget, or else it's never going to work. So from that test budget, you start going into new things like content development. We would never have the content development we have today if we weren't willing to go out there and test it. So test and learn is a big opportunity, and you got to have that conversation with your CFO and make sure those are off the book numbers, so to speak, that you're trying new things, educated new things. You're not sponsoring a race car just for fun, but you're educated in what your goals are and how you want to accomplish it.
And sending a bouquet of flowers in a roller skate helps too.
Exactly. That's low cost, though. That's low cost.
Lindsay?
Yeah, I think, like, to your point, you want to bring the CFO along for the ride, and as many people as you can, and it's sort of like this really delicate balance between, like, everyone kind of being under the hood, but also, like, stay out of here, you don't need all the details. So for me, I really think about, like, okay, what is the alignment on the overarching goal, and, like, what are the guardrails? So to your point, like, what is that main KPI that you're moving? Or, for us on Perigold, it's been, like, what is that ratio of ad spend to revenue, basically? And what is the profitability, measurements that we need to hit? And it's like, okay, if we actually work together on the forecasting of hitting these numbers and we agree those are the ones, like, don't worry about, was it the bouquet or was it this thing that we did and how we get there? Like, that's for the experts on the team to determine, but come along for the journey on hitting that. And to your point, I think you do have to have a test budget. And so, your overarching media mix and your plan and your budget allocation should be very much driven off of what is the singular goal, or maybe there's 2, 3 max that you need to hit, and then you prioritize the allocations under that to match it. And if you don't have a test budget under that, like, that's really a shame, because if all of a sudden you're not going to meet your numbers or meet the goals that you set out, you won't really have any idea what's the next lever to pull to do that if you haven't tested anything. And so I think, like, being able to kind of sell that in with a bunch of your partners is really critical in just making sure what's the next best thing I'm going to do if this doesn't work out. And I liked thinking about the test budget in that way. It's like, or if we actually hit it and you want me to scale more, like, I don't really know where to put that next if I'm not trying anything. And so I think that's, like, a nice way to bring people in and to get people excited. Plus, anyone who's a marketer fields at least 3 emails a week from someone who's like, I saw this thing that someone did and it was really cool. Why can't we do that? And so that's a really nice way to pivot that into, like, being a part of the test budget or the things to do. Because I feel like, you don't want to crush people's enthusiasm for all the fun marketing things, but you also have to kind of keep it within the guardrails that you've set out.
Well, I mean, once upon a time, TikTok was new, right?
Right,
Once upon a time, Facebook was new, and now you're talking about 2 companies in Meta and ByteDance that make up probably between the 2 of them $160 billion a year globally. Yeah. So, that's a ton of cash considering you got a $650 billion digital, budget across the world. So, that's a big chunk. And even with the, the lack of opportunity to attribute actual sales based on Apple and everybody else, I mean, that's a pretty sizable chunk. So it's got to be pushing the needle in a direction that is positive.
Yeah, and I do want to say too, if you can get as specific as possible, again, you don't want to inundate people with details, but sort of a micro planning level. If you're going out there and say, I want to grow customers by 5%, that's a different conversation than if you said, listen, we're underpenetrated versus our competitors in the 18 to 25 demographic. Here's where they are. Here's a plan specifically to target these platforms to grow that percentage to get on par with the industry. So I think that's a completely different approach to a CFO versus it is a little bit wider scale. So as much as you can hone in and narrow in on what you're trying to do, the better that conversation is going to be.
I like that.
I love that. You're turning a Gen Z language into a CFO language.
Yeah,
that's pretty great. So, in that vein, we don't have a ton of time, and I definitely want to open it up to the audience. Before we do, you both have been doing this for quite some time. What is something that may have surprised you doing all of this, and what kind of advice or learnings do you have that you could share with the rest of the group here?
It's a good one. Want me to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. It's not a good one, but I can try. I think what surprises me is probably no matter what organization I go to, there's a lot of foundational work, especially with data, that needs to happen to allow you to do these bigger opportunities and ideas that you're thinking of. There's always a lot of interconnecting parts. Measurement's a big piece of that. Tracking, but it's also just where your customer data lives, how it gets surfaced. Is there a CDP? Is there not a CDP? Do CDPs exist? Are they the hot thing or not? I mean, there's just so much ebb and flow from a foundational perspective that there's a lot of work that needs to go into it. So I think you just need to be eyes wide open and make sure those fundamental growth paths to make your data more accessible, to make your reporting and measurement more spot on to what you want to do. Make sure those are parallel paths to the bigger ideas, because you're never really going to get to fruition on those bigger ideas, because you have to iterate, you have to learn if those other things aren't happening. So just, it's not necessarily a surprise per se, but I think the amount of time and dedication you need to allocate to those more fundamental things is ongoing, and you just need to take advantage of that before you always think about the shiny new object.
I'm always surprised at how much old is new again. Like, yes, there's TikTok, and then there's always a new place, and there's always a new thing, and you can quickly be left behind if you're not doing that. So you got to adapt there. But the truisms of marketing, I am surprised as time goes on, how often you just kind of go back to the basics on consumer behavior, the journey, the funnel, the basics. And it's so easy to kind of lose sight of the absolute basics of marketing, because you can get wrapped up in super data this and new platform this and new thing I got to do here. And all of a sudden you've totally lost track of just have you told someone something? Do you have a product someone wants? Have you told something very compelling? Have you reached them where they are? Just real basics. And so, it's always at least nice to know that that's going to continue on in marketing as everything else changes.
I love it. Thank you. I learned so much. I'm going to send my ex-wife one of those flowers from the Mockingbird. I'm going to volunteer her as tribute. Awesome. So that said, I want to open it up to the audience for questions. See, people have seen the movie, get that. Everybody else is like, all right, this guy's a dork.
All right, Lindsay, Jason, Todd, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for today.